with our next story. So this next thing we're going to talk about is the Gosling himself. The walking meme. I just made that up on the spot. That has no place in actual reality of being his nickname. Um, but we have Ryan Gosling, who we got some news about this past week, who is poised to star in a new Wolfman movie for Universal Pictures, and I guess this is a part of their whole, monster movie uh, mashup, team up, something universe. I don't know. It all gets very confusing. But essentially, and this comes to us from Collider. Ryan Gosling is poised to star in a new Wolfman movie that is beginning to take shape at Universal Pictures. Multiple sources have told Collider over the past several months. Corey Finley, who I believe wrote and directed, although I might not be correct about that, HBO's Bad Education, is being eyed to direct from a script by Rebecca Angelo and Lauren Shakir Blum, based on a pitch from Gosling, who had initially considered directing the film himself. The studio is still meeting with directors and is expected to make a decision soon. And they also go on to say that the film's going to take kind of like a darker sort of note, and have a kind of a tone that's similar to Jake Gyllenhaal's Nightcrawler, which was a fucking fantastic film for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Yeah.
The classic '70s drama Network, which is very fucking interesting. I think that's a very interesting sort of take on potential Wolfman film, but I also think that could definitely work, right? So if you think back to Nightcrawler, you think to yourself that it's kind of like a slow descent into like fucking madness for the for Jake Gyllenhaal's character. I forget what his character was actually named, but if you think about that context, then having a Wolfman film with Ryan Gosling kind of taking that same sort of note isn't completely out of like the realm of possibility. So I'm all about this. I think it sounds very interesting, and I want to see what comes of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would be good for Ryan Gosling too. I mean, obviously he's a stellar actor. Everybody knows that he's a stellar actor. And I actually thought it was really interesting too that initially he was poised to direct this film, but Ryan Gosling, he very well could still might still be directing this film or part of like what is it, like a co-director or assistant director, whatever it may be. But I think this will be good for him, like, so not only starring in a film where he's both acting and potentially directing it, but like a character that already has like a rich history and storytelling. There's been like several Wolfman movies that were made. I think the most recent Wolfman movie was with who's the actor who played Hannibal Lecter again?
His name's Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins, and I think like Benicio del Toro was in that film as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan Gosling, his most recent movies, all like very well known. I mean, La La Land. I think that movie won didn't it win Best Picture, or wasn't like a runner up for Best Picture?
Yeah, it was mistakenly given Best Picture, but then they were like, "Whoops, sorry, yeah, kidding, it's Moonlight." Moonlight
So that was in 2016, La La Land, and Blue Valentine, which is in 2010. He also had like Blade Runner 2049, which came out in 2017. I think that was less of like a Ryan Gosling movie. It was just like a great, continuation of the Blade Runner story with Harrison Ford and Dave Bautista. First Man was his, I think that was his most recent project in 2018.
Which is a pretty good movie. I would have to say so myself.
But the thing about all these movies that Ryan Gosling has done, they've been for the most part like smaller projects, right? Like smaller budget projects, smaller name projects. Drive was probably one of my favorite projects that he's done recently, as well as what is it, the Drive Along the Pines or something like that.
Oh, the Place Beyond the Pines.
Place Behind the Pines. Yeah, that was a good project.
But I would have to push back a little bit. I don't know if he necessarily is taking like lower. I think maybe he typically does, but he's done some big things, right? Like, so if you think back to Blade Runner 2049, wasn't a small movie by any stretch of the imagination. Very expensive and big.
When I think about that movie, I don't think like this is a Ryan Gosling film, right? I think Harrison
I think I think it was a mashup of kind of both things, right? So, Blade Runner was
I
like
completely forgot he was in that movie.
say that again?
I completely forgot Ryan Gosling was in that movie.
No, I didn't at all. He's in literally the entire movie. But I think that Blade Runner 2049 was kind of it was um it was an independent film with a big film budget. Is kind of how it felt like, because it was more quiet, more understated film, but it had a massive budget. And then also, he First Man, which is, that's no small film in and of itself. So I think he has a tendency to kind of float. He's built the arena where he can kind of float from one thing to another. Sometimes what happens is that you get a person who can go from doing really small, low budget films to doing big blockbusters, and they can't go back. They kind of just float there in that stratosphere of only being in these big budget films. But I think he's made a good career out of basically doing whatever the fuck he wants to do, and and then also being selective about what he wants to do with each project. So this Wolfman film doesn't, I don't think it's completely out of the wheelhouse for him, as far as being a part of a project that's a little bigger in scope.
No, yeah, and I think you made a good point there. Like Ryan Gosling, he can do like again, he could do like a Blade Runner, which I think was going to be a big film, whether he was in it or not, just because it's like Blade Runner. But he can do like Crazy Stupid Love. He could do Gangster Squad, which was, I think, another one of the really good projects that he did.
Yeah, the Nice
So he
Guys.
has range.
Yeah, I think the Nice Guys was a really great film as well.
Nice Guys is funny. So Ryan Gosling definitely has range. I think this would be a good project for him. Like, all right, hey, here's like the actor we're familiar with, who we know is great, who's bringing back to life this like real character who already has like a rich story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think of the Universal projects. I was reading in the article of the Universal projects that are underway or being planned. This Wolfman project is one that has some real legs under it, and we're likely to see this. Hopefully start to like go into motion pretty soon, and maybe even go into production post the coronavirus pandemic. So yeah, I'd be here for this for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our